Is it me? It is me.
Go.
I couldn't tell, yeah.
Okay. Cardboard box is nice.
I just saw one of the smartest
okay,
chatters I've ever seen.
What was it?
Okay,
What
now
they
you're
said?
Responded to somebody yelling and said, "If you don't like how they're playing, don't watch."
Stupidest thing I've ever heard he has to watch. Yeah, I'm not gonna let him leave.
I actually hate when people watching Charlie and Rizzo use their Twitch primes
God.
all at the same time. It's
yeah,
the
it
fucking
really gets on
worst.
my nerves.
I won't sleep tonight the more Twitch primes there are.
Yeah, it's just so rough.
Alright, we're gonna jump on this one. Ready, go. We just ride this puppy.
That's just kind
Yep.
of
Alright, let's jump on to this in 3, 2, 1, jump.
Oh my God. Just,
unexpected.
Back.
just,
Second one?
yeah, stay on the second one for now. Just stay on it for now.
second.
Just
Okay,
stay.
Okay.
Okay. Call it.
Alright, ready, go. Stay. Stay one more.
Okay.
And we're going now. Stay. Stay one more. And this one we move.
We're moving.
Good nice, good comms.
Are we aiming for the metal sheet or are we trying to shoot over it?
Metal sheet. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, you don't like keep moving over that?
3, 2, 1, jump.
Good call to be safe there.
Oh, okay. Let's look.
No.
I'm circling. That's me.
Man, this nigga died already, bro. God. Hate this fucking dude.
And so we have to move the blocks in the way that we need them.
So,
Like that, I think.
that's actually really good. Yeah. I think that's it.
Alright.
Alright, ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump.
Yep, I nailed that instantly.
That was crazy.
Crazy.
Ready, jump.
Yep, I nailed that.
That was insane, actually.
3, 2, 1, jump. 3, 2, 1, jump.
Oh, too much. Now we're good.
There he is.
Easy.
Alright. 3, 2, 1, jump.
Easy.
Right
So
on the
easy.
elevator. Oh, yeah.
So
Look at us.
easy.
Easy.
These
These
are bounce.
bounce?
Yeah,
Okay,
they
now,
bounce.
I don't know what these are.
3, 2, 1.
I think they fall.
Oh, they do fall. He's. Wait, no, they don't.
No, they just kind of hover.
Oh.
Yeah, they just hover. He's right.
Okay.
That looked like it was falling.
Ready, jump. Ready,
You're gonna let it
jump.
settle a little bit, I think.
Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump. Ready, jump.
You're so good at saying that.
Yeah, you really needed that.
Oh, there it goes.
We needed that.
There's our ride, boys.
Yeah.
There she is.
Pioneers, right?
So they just freak
That's so I'm on the. You can skip it.
stay running.
There's no risk. Just jump to the right, just come to the right. Just come to the right. Okay, I'll come back. Oh, that is tragic.
We're falling. Wood right here. Wood.
So then, I think for that, just go one at a time. So for this, sit. Yeah, sit.
Well, hang on. Where does it do? What are you gonna glitch out?
I like the speed run, but if we fuck that
Here you go. What I say.
Reset to the highest point, right?
that's true.
Minor league. It's not like glitching.
Mine are nice. What do you want to do, Matt? You're speed guy.
Bitch.
Oh, see, yeah, mine is frozen for me.
Forget it.
Oh, nice. No, Rizzo, wrong
Got
way.
him.
Wait, he found something.
Yeah, no, that was a great skill.
Yeah, that was a good skip. I like he found a great skip. It's like, alright, now let's do the whole thing again.
That was me.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was you.
Oh, there's a pattern here.
Fire, ice.
Wait,
Ice.
I'm taking a picture of my phone.
Hell, you cheater.
Yeah, I got it. Saturday's fire, boys.
Alright.
Ready, go.
Ice.
Ice.
Go.
Oh,
Ice again.
Go.
Fire.
Go.
Fire.
Go.
Ice.
Go.
Fire.
Go.
Ice.
Go. Go.
We did it.
we did it.
No.
Wait, what is this?
Oh, it is.
Oh, fuck. Shit. No. Wait, okay, just abandon it, man. Just abandon it.
Go back. Don't go back.
Please abandon. No.
Oh, wait, I'm smushed.
No shot. This is how we lose, right?
No.
Because I'm stuck on the wrong side of it.
We'll figure it out.
What do I do?
Here, I'm just gonna make it move.
Wait,
Make it move.
if three of you get in there, surely I'll be fine.
I can't get in though because you're holding me from.
Alright. Let's
Oh,
jump
fuck.
off again.
Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. We're
Alright, everybody over here.
Alright.
Okay.
Why did that take so long?
Oh,
to
shit,
move
what the
the
fuck?
first time?
I don't know.
We can go now, bro.
Sorry, I thought you guys were talking. I thought you were gonna call.
You're the jump guy.
But you see, we could probably go.
Yeah.
I'm real weak to fire.
Yeah.
Alright. Ready, go. Ready, go.
Oh, Charles.
falls asleep.
What they was doing.
How did I miss that?
We're though my king.
God, gamer does it again. Thank you, Rico.
That was so sassy. Next go around.
Stay for the boys.
We'll make that jump.
Oh, you think we can get on? No.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try this.
You try,
one.
you
Alright,
try, yeah.
somebody on the edge. Somebody on the edge.
Okay. Nope.
Damn
Oh,
it.
that pulled. Never mind, that didn't pull me. I accidentally hit W. I tried to
What the
lie.
fuck?
Oh god.
Did the thing. It's okay, there's a trampoline.
Why they bring out the monkey, man?
You got this, man. Now what? Okay.
Yeah, just stay like that, man. I'm gonna spin myself.
I'm pulling you.
I'm using centrifugal force. Oh god. Just hit the
Are we
trampoline.
right on the trampoline? Oh shit.
Bounce and then go across.
Yeah.
Alright, we got to wait for that slow key again.
Yeah, run it back.
What?
Danny, your comms.
No, we've been
We did the whole game.
Yeah, also if you don't do comms, you will 100% not be lucid. I know how this goes.
You've been doing it the whole game.
Yeah, you've been really good. Please, will you keep going?
Damn.
3, 2, 1, go.
Right beside the head.
Damn, she's kind of hot.
There we go, now Matt's all horned up.
Yep.
He's back.
That's the man I know.
Bop.
I'll stay on one.
Just one more ride.
Matt's probably the type of motherfucker who raises his kids to take out a bank. What?
That's the type of motherfucker Matt is, goddamn right.
Say it with your chest.
And you can say it again.
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kids are called bankers. Ready?
Oh, sorry. I'm just so sorry, guys.
I'm seeing it.
You're fine, you're fine.
Get him up, get him up.
Oh god, no, Danny, no, no.
It's physics. It's alright, we're right above the flying carpet.
Yeah, there's a pillow beneath us.
I got you. I got you. I got you.
Right at
The
it.
physics that pulls you off is so frustrating.
I got you.
I'm losing altitude. I tried pulling myself to you as well.
Why
Go
is
to
the
the end.
why
We're
is the
gonna go to the
pulling
end.
not working?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's right, because we're 3v1 here.
How's this working?
Not at all, actually. Hold on, wait. Let me try something. Keep doing that, keep doing that.
Yep.
Oh, it's gonna go back to watch out.
Yeah, hold on. This is working. I'm shortening.
a windstorm down here.
Charlie, I have an idea.
What's your idea? I mean, because I'm making
If it's
distance.
anything other than just dropping onto the fucking pillow.
No.
Danny, it's
Not
ridiculous.
an idea. Watch this. Charlie, get ready to grab the end.
What is with this dude?
Wait, are you sure?
jump off.
I'm kind of close. Wait, I'm kind of close to this.
Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready. Oh.
Okay. Never mind.
Flying carpet.
Alright, run it back. What? Oh, this is.
I thought that one would hold the chain. 3, 2, 1.
Shit.
Oh wow.
That was a close shave.
Holy.
That is what I meant to say.
Alright, we need to run jump this in.
3, 2, 1, go.
Oh wow.
3, 2, 1, go. I wasn't even worried. Should we jump onto the hand?
Nah, just do it the right way. Let's not take any risks for you.
Alright. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay.
You go down to his head.
No, I think you go to his lightning bolt over there.
Oh yeah, but
Oh, to his head. Yeah,
Platform behind us.
I think we stay in here.
yeah.
Oh, I'm like looking
Oh, it
around.
just flies.
Oh, I thought it was this.
Is it gonna go through the wall?
Oh my
I
god,
don't
this
really-
game's
This guy is annoying. I'm gonna just go down there.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, 2.
And then
Just oh yeah. Go to the next one.
Ready, go.
oh god, that was definitely not the timing.
I think it was. I think we were a little.
Oh, we could have just waited a second longer.
Okay, we just reached that still. Guess I'll just run from that.
Here we go.
Damn.
Bed and whatever creepy garbage.
Touch it even. You have no fucking.
Why is he running away?
I'm going for it. It's pretty low risk.
Alright, go for it, go for it, go. Go. This could be so tired.
Shut your shit up, nigga.
Okay, I got you.
We might make it.
Yeah, if I had
That
poison,
last fall right there was the most detrimental thing
what I do?
imaginable.
Just keep it going.
Come on, I'm going.
It's right there. I can't move.
Guys. Make sure you don't fall.
That's just so.
He's screaming.
That's automatic.
Oh, he got up here?
Super trampoline of it.
Oh, that makes sense.
I don't think his big ass can get up here.
Damn, you gotta, that one you gotta
Bitch.
call out. That you gotta call out.
Look how fast he moves.
Like you guys can. Right. Ready to go.
You definitely want to give yourself some.
Alright. Ready to go.
Oh, no. Fuck. No!
This is not our highest point.
That's crazy.
Wait, that motherfucker hurt.
So does half of America, man. We don't see them whining about some setbacks.
What is this last? We said this.
Oh, yeah, there is. Neutral frown for that.
Okay, someone is a pattern, somebody is a dwarf.
You ready to jump? Go now.
Okay?
Yep.
Smile.
Low front neutral.
I don't know. Oh, it's okay. This one.
Good sound. Oh my god, man. We pulled all of us.
Taking so much damage.
Yeah, we
Got wrapped around.
yeah, we got wrapped around.
We had to go right or left.
Yeah, you also need to call out when you're jumping because that pulled two of us into the thing. Oh, no. Yep.
Be so far ahead if you can. Just slow down. There it is. That's perfect.
Stay in a claw.
I wonder how much damage I do.
There you go. Jump again. Oh my god. Save us, man. No. I think that second one clipped my tootsies.
Okay, that was good. If you're far ahead, you have to come back with it.
Yes.
Another spinny wheel.
Go. Just got started.
Neutral front.
Yup.
Right. Go right.
Yes!
That was you.
Craft some poison.
Oh!
Hey, sorry I yelled at you guys.
That's okay.
I'll forgive it.
I deserved it.
Alright, 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh my god, man. Holy fuck.
That was a big overshot. Sometimes it happens, okay?
The steps are weird. Oh my god. We are a mess. But it's
Now we're a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, it's confidence now.
Exactly.
What could go wrong?
Back,
Sorry, I
bitch.
was looking at the claw machine. Someone almost
Fuck, didn't go up now.
Well, did they win? If not, I don't care.
They didn't.
Way to go!
Wait, second half, baby. Second half.
No, I can't be real.
We're halfway done. Oh, fuck.
You gotta react.
Wait, no. Alright, reacting.
Poison him.
Alright, nice reaction.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah, sitting in lap.
Hit with a few more, he finna be gone.
Ready to go.
That's it.
Take us home, Danny. Oh, it's time.
You want some more? Alright. Bitch.
This is actually the end of it.
The original.
Just handling all this is not impressive.
Oh, this is so cinematic.
Chop his neck off.
You look so good from this camera angle.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
crazy how good you're doing.
Actually, it's insane. You are so
No!
I suppose.
Wait, let's just run this back.
Yeah.
Under. Left side, left side, left side. Jump.
Yep.
Jump again. Yeah, we're good. Smiley, frown, neutral.
No! Who is that?
Bitch.
What the fuck?
Come here.
Sick of that,
It's
dude.
trying to get us to reset.
That's fucked, man.
Actually wasn't, and I swear.
That's cringe and you know it, Buster.
I'm trying to hit you with a punch.
Alright, Danny.
Bitch.
Alright, if I don't get this one, you guys can try it.
I looked at it, I was like, ah, yes, the upside down smile.
Thanks, membership potato.
Look at the horse's animation.
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Not to worry, but the past is disintegrating behind you.
Well, you have so much room, Danny. You don't even fret.
Gonna be rich.
Can you engage Nos? Engage Nos!
Oh, that is so clutch.
What a clutch.
That was.
Wow.
I've never seen a better play.
Oh, we got some spinnies.
Have the angels face themselves as it did in the scripture.
True.
Because this is right. This is going to be so good.
I don't even know what else it could possibly be. It's got it.
But it's definitely right because they're steaming on some of their.
Oh, let's go.
Oh,
That was yellow.
Yep.
Hold W.
Second book, second book, second book.
Why there's so many of them?
oh my god, you can feel your bed.
It's the gates.
What if it's like a boss fight? There's like a second stage.
Oh, cutscene.
There's gotta be one more challenge.
Oh my god, we're gonna brawl each other.
We're so bloody.
Oh.
We did it. We're gamers.
Gonna fall off, nigga.
Look how much faster I am.
I don't know. You're super fast.
We did it! Wait, here, wait, don't jump yet. 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh,
What?
that's so cute. Ah!
Told you.
Just over 4 hours. Is that a record? So good.
Oh, it's cutscene.
See if they respawn.
Gain together two.
Holy shit, they
The devil was evil the whole
that was like
time.
fucking cutscenes after Marvel.
Oh no.
Holy, what a night. What
Wow.
a night.
Jeepers.
Hey, that was
What?
fun, boys.
Yeah, that was
That was-
fun.
levels of baseline negative affectivity and other sort of intrinsic characteristics of their child. But there's become a constant hyper-focus in today's culture about this idea of perfection and the perfect child or the perfect environment. And I think that has led to a lot of the sort of the notion of the suffocation or the devouring mother that is actually, you know, enigmal to healthy development.
You might say, as a rule of thumb, that the combined influence of the mother and father should be about as positive and about as negative as the typical potentially social interaction that a child's likely to have in the world, right? So you can think of parents as caregivers, but as the child matures, the parents should also become proxies for the actual social world that the child's most likely to encounter. So one of the reasons that disciplinary strategies are necessary with regards to the fostering of infant and toddler development is that parents obviously have to prepare their children to behave in the real world. And that means that the child has to learn to integrate their emotions into a framework of behavior and attention that other people find attractive and inviting. And that when I worked in the developmental field, which was back in mostly in the 90s, mid 90s to say mid 2000s, or the first decade of the 2000s, I was struck and hurt in some ways by the fact that the destiny of children who aren't well socialized between that age of 2 and 4 is pretty damn dismal. And it really struck home for me the necessity of parents to do everything they could to encourage another instinct in their children, which is that instinct towards mastery and integration. You know, we talked about the instinctual basis of negative emotion and positive emotion, but there's also an instinct towards integration, which is probably associated with the transfer of behavioral control from the more primordial and immediate emotional systems to the more distal and social systems that are mediated by the cortex, which takes a lot more socialization, so to speak, to program. And so the reason that parents need to regulate the emotions of their children is, first of all, so their children won't be suffering as a consequence of the domination of their negative emotion, but also so that other people can appreciate or even stand having their children around, so they'll play with them and educate them. And so if you're at the beck and call of your infant constantly, and you're doing that in part because you can't tolerate any distress on the part of the infant, or you're covertly rewarding the infant's infantile behavior so that he or she won't leave, then you're absolutely devastating you're destroying the possibility that they're going to be able to have friends and thrive in the world. And so do you think there's any evidence that developmental process has been interfered with at a societal level now?
Well, that's right. What you said is right. It's completely a fair description of sort of this process of impulse control development and so forth. And I think, there's a lot of work that has been done regarding sort of broad-based trends in sort of helicopter parenting or, parental over-involvement. And I think that's exactly what's happening, at least at some sort of generalized level in the larger culture. If there's an inability for the child to engage the environment because they're constantly dependent on the parent for whatever reason, either to fulfill the parent's needs of their own emotional satisfaction or to fulfill the child's need, was never told, you need to explore the environment. What you see is an inability to regulate the impulses.
Whoa.
Ends up in, down the road, a complete failure. And that's kind of what you see in the phenotype of some of this cluster B stuff we're seeing play out on the tent cities and these campus protests, for example. Even in 2020 with a lot of the rioting, it's just sort of this completely emotionally dysregulated behavior. And that's downstream from the millennial generation being raised in sort of this
Killed
different
everybody out
way
here.
than was 30, 40 years ago, where the child went out, they explored, a lot of sort of commentators have noted, you went and played it on the street till it got dark and then came home. That isn't happening. So what is the sort of effect, or can we sort of quantify in some way what that's doing? I think there's definitely evidence for this playing out. There's definitely evidence for an influence of some of this overprotection But in terms of, and this is one of the things that the ideologues in the academy will do, is they want you to sort of mechanistically fine-grain measure this and make the case for it in sort of a mechanistic way. And that's sort of the challenge that someone like me is faced with. We can see with our own eyes these trends playing out. But then how do we frame it in an academic, methodological way to make the case? And I think we are at that point. But there has to be room in the academy to investigate these questions. They can't be censored. They can't be allowed to be not asked. And so grant money needs to be funded for those types of things. But I definitely think there's evidence for these types of large trends that we're seeing. I mean, we see them with our own eyes. And sort of it's undeniable in the sense that you can look at something that's happening earlier and you can see something that's happening now, and you can make the link, but the challenge is really formalizing that in some sort of methodology.
Right, yeah, well, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Leakey struggle with that.
Abigail Schreier.
Schreier, yeah. So let me offer some sociological explanations for this dysregulation. Because I'm always inclined to, well, what the feminists do, and as you said, if you're going to consider multiple variables, you consider sociological and economic variables along with psychological variables. So tell me what you think about these contributors. So while now we have older parents, often old enough so that under normal human conditions they would have been grandparents. And so older parents are more conservative, and they also tend to be richer, and they have far fewer children. So they have all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. Plus, they're more conservative. And they can also provide for their children in a way that makes saying no to their wants dependent on the decision of the parent rather than the restrictions of their economic circumstances. So those are three big changes, right? So now let's say the typical mother is 30. Let's say and because she's 30, likely to be in more positive economic circumstances and therefore able to respond to the child's demands with the provision of material wealth. Then we also have the fact that there's far fewer children in each family, and so that means each child doesn't have to contend in what's likely a beneficial way, at least under some circumstances, with a multiplicity of siblings with whom they have to share the attention and resources and learn how to get along with, right, in that intense cooperative and competitive environment that characterizes a sibling relationship. And then we also have the additional problem of single parents or parents with multiple relationships who've had disrupted familial relationships themselves. Then we have the problem as well that there just aren't as many children out on the street. There aren't mothers watching them all the time like there were when there were neighborhoods full of children. And so that's in some sense independent of the psychological variables that we've been describing. And so what does the current literature in relationship to developmental psychopathology have to say about those longer-term sociological transformations?
Well, I think that's an excellent question that isn't really being asked in the developmental psychology literature, at least to the extent that I've seen it recently. The developmental psychology literature tends to be heavily focused on sort of a mechanistic investigation of things in infancy or childhood, with less of a focus on those broad-based trends that you just mentioned. And I think that's one area that needs to be improved in the literature. Obviously, single parenting has been studied, but the role of what you're noting, these more broad-based secular trends, for example, of older parenting, fewer children, to my knowledge at least in terms of the literature scope that I have looked at recently, those types of questions aren't being asked because, in part, I think the answers is not what the ideologues in the academy want to hear, that there is sort of evidence for some of the things that they don't want said. So, the role of younger parents, single parenting, and older parents has to be all looked at with sort of an equal poise that is not really happening right now in developmental psych. And that's one of the limitations of developmental psych, is it's so fine-grained and focused on some of these more fine-tune interactions,
You gonna
like
catch
I
it.
mentioned to you, with face-to-face, still face, and they miss the forest by focusing exclusively on the trees. And so I think we need to get back to some of these bigger questions that are asking, why do we see a generation growing up in the way they are with sort of an undeniable, I guess, less of an ability to regulate their emotions than previous generations? How much of that is due to actual, three things really. How much of it is due to their inborn temperament? How much of it is due to being differences in how they were reared? But also how much of it is due to differences in the larger cultural milieu and how that's influencing their decisions, perhaps consciously, to regulate or not regulate their emotions.
Starting a business can be tough, but thanks to Shopify, running your online storefront is easier than ever. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Our marketing team uses Shopify every day to sell our merchandise, and we love how easy it is to add more items, ship products, and track conversions. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading e-commerce platforms. No matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/JBP. Go to shopify.com/JBP now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/JBP.
Okay, so we can add some additional variables
Fuck
there that
off.
need to be considered. So Jonathan Haidt has been making a strong case for the danger of
Social media.
Well, yeah, but we can expand that a bit because I've talked to some of the leaders, let's say, of the social media networks about Haidt's concerns, and they've made some very interesting points. It's social media to some degree and the intense competitiveness, abstraction, and backbiting that characterize those realms. But the thing is, it isn't obvious at all that children and adolescents are spending the bulk of their time on social media per se. Depends on how you define it. So they're also texting instead of interacting face to face, for example. And then they're also exposing themselves to other content online like pornography. But then there's something more fundamental, I think, that's often missed, which is that, see, when we had little kids back in the 90s, my wife and I were the youngest parents we knew with the oldest kids, even though we weren't that young. We didn't start having kids till we were in our late 20s. Now, one of the things that would happen was that we would take our kids over to other houses that had children, and when we got there, the parents would put a television show for the kids.
Fuck, is there a hole right there?
Which I was never happy with, because what should have happened was the kids were thrown into the basement, so to speak, and with nothing to do, so that they had to play. And so they could watch TV, and of course they were quiet if they were doing that, but they weren't inventing their own dramas. They weren't interacting face to face in a manner that made them come up with the creative conceptualizations that characterize dramatic play, like playing house, for example, that lay the bloody groundwork for future adult relationships. Now, and that was TV. That had nothing on screens, because everyone was concerned about the detrimental effect of TV back then, but my God, now, the screens are absolutely everywhere. So the screens have content, but they also interfere with child's play. So I'd like your opinion about that. And also one other thing that I've been thinking about. Tell me what you think about this. You know, I watch all these strange identity issues that are emerging in adolescence and even on university campuses in early adulthood. This preoccupation with sexual identity, with gender identity, and also the variant forms of even more imaginative play that are associated with that, like the furry culture, for example, and the anime culture. And what I see there is delayed dramatic play. Right, so I'm wondering if what's happening to some of these kids is that they get away from this oppressive family environment where they're never allowed any freedom. They burst out at say, the age of 17 or 18, and then they have to frenetically engage in a dramatic search for identity because they didn't do it when they were like 3, which is when it really needs to happen. We radically underestimate the significance of dramatic play. Then we have dramatic play on the part of rebellious adolescents constantly, as they protest in the streets.
That's right, 100%. You know, I've spoken with Jonathan Haidt and others, and I've really been kind of engaged in discourse about the role of social media, and how that plays into the development of emotional regulation. You're right. How do we define that? But I think your point about, it's basically more broadly than just whether they're on TikTok or whether they're on Facebook or whether they're, on Snapchat. It's looking at a screen rather than at another face. And you see that wherever you go. I mean, even when I do work on a supermarket deli now on a part-time basis, customers will come in, they'll be looking at their phone, or I'll be trying to look at my phone, and it's a completely different world and landscape that we're now in that has sort of taken away the normal face-to-face communicative rough and tumble play where you're actually physically looking at somebody rather than at a screen, or your attention is not constantly looking at a screen. So it's much more broad. And I think the other point too, you said, it's not just social media. You're right. It's social media combined with an increasing secularism that is basically, we've lost all sense of moral constraint. So when there's sort of a weakening of all, traditional classical religions, and there's no orienting structure, you get thrown into the social media world where you can basically create anything. That gives rise to what we see as this complete inability to form, an identity in early childhood. Now they're on the screens where there's just basically a consumer market for identities, whether that's identities as furries, whether it's an identity as, gender identity, or even, like you say, it's a complete role-playing world now that's happening on social media. And one of the individuals who's done a lot of great work on this is Catherine Haidt, who's default friend on Twitter. She's looked at some of this, and I think we're missing, to a certain extent, in all the discourse around the role of social media on mental health, and the ability to establish a strong identity, is the fact that we're now moving into a different era where we're actually living online rather than in the world. And that's why I've been constantly stressing the need for athletics-based programs or environmental programs where children are in nature to get away from this.
Bro, stop looking at these fucking things,
man. The world is completely imaginary online, because that leads to all sorts of limitless ability to establish identities that while they may exist in this creative realm, when you get back into the real world, they're useless. They're dysfunctional, and that's sort of what we see.
Well, they're also not subject, as far as I can tell, they're also not subject to the constraints that are characteristic of the real world. Like, one of the things I've been very concerned about, and I'd like your thoughts on this, is I think it was what's that boxer's name?
That's so cheap.
Mike Tyson, who so famously said the problem with the virtual world is that it's made all of you all too comfortable with never getting punched when you deserve it. Now, that's a bad paraphrase, but he did actually say that, and I think there's something about that that's actually very interesting and very correct. One of the I don't know how many comments I've prepared online, but it's tens of thousands, and I've started to develop something like a troll taxonomy. And there is a culture online they call lulz culture, and that's laugh out loud, or I did it for the lulz. And it's basically a culture of sadists and psychopaths. And this is actually quite well documented in relevant research literature, because there has been ongoing research into the personality structure of provocative trolls, and they're dark tetrad types. So they'd fit into the cluster B psychopathology. They are narcissistic, so they want unearned attention. They're Machiavellian, so they use their language as a tool to manipulate rather than to communicate. They're psychopathic, which means they're predatory parasites. And that wasn't good enough, as it turned out, because that was the dark triad. They had to add sadistic to that. And that's where the lulz element really comes into play, because the sadist takes positive delight in the suffering of others, and that's really the nature of lulz culture. And it can thrive online because, well, people say things online all the time that would get them an immediate slap in the real world, like a morally required immediate slap. And so they say things that, now, the reason that concerns me, see, my sense is that we know that the base rate of psychopathy across cultures is about 4%, which isn't that high. But we also know that there were historical epochs in which the cluster B personality types probably got the upper hand. And I would suspect that happened in the French Revolution. I think it probably happened in the Russian Revolution. Probably happened during the rise of the Nazis in National Socialist Germany. You don't need that many people to be disinhibited in their psychopathology before your culture might be in grave danger. And that's particularly true if they can organize, which they can really do online. And so I'm very concerned that the incentive structure online facilitates dark tetrad behavior. Now, there's more evidence too, right? Because here's another problem. 25% or thereabouts of online content is pornographic. So basically criminal, right? It's basically prostitution facilitated by electronic pimps. So that's not good. And then a tremendous amount of online activity is outright criminal, right? I mean, older people are just being scammed on an unbelievably constant basis. And so it might be that 50% of online activity is in the psychopathic, antisocial, and cluster B realm. It's very, very difficult to regulate. And my suspicions are is that spilling over in a really counterproductive manner into the actual flesh and blood world. And so, you know, I'm curious about your thoughts about that, because one of the things that's odd about you on Twitter, in a good way, is that you are constantly drawing people's attention to the relationship between cluster B psychopathology and online and political behavior. And so what do you think about that as a hypothesis with regard to the pathological incentive structure of the virtual world, right? Maybe it's a non-playable, degenerating game. Like, it could be.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, that's exactly why, and I know you're familiar with the paper that I wrote on this. Social media is an incubator of all of this cluster B type of stuff, because on social media, you have this indirect, communicative, language-based amplification of all of these traits, whereas male aggression in the real world, it doesn't scale. You have an encounter, there's something said, somebody gets, punched in the face, and that's it. What you have is, on social media, indirect aggression, and you have all of these traits and antagonism and histrionic, behavior that just basically gets amplified and emotionally resonates and resonates and resonates and balloons out. And it builds and builds and builds. And, one of the best examples of that is what we saw with Hamas. I mean, they filmed all their atrocities as they were going into Israel. And that was one of the most, interesting, in a morbid way, kind of aspects of that incursion. Was it was just filmed. They were basically, in fact, doing it for the lulz. Regardless of whether you think on how much atrocities, or what was the exact specific atrocities that were committed, they were filming them on GoPro for exactly that reason, and to amplify that. And so, that is one way for a perfect example of how this is all spiraled out of control. And I will say for myself, others have written about the cluster B stuff in terms of political ideology and how that's played out before. The famous Loboszewski is one of them, and others. So, but I just see it so clearly, because when you look at the traits and you look at what's happening online, it's a perfect incubator for all of these just to continue to amplify and amplify and amplify without any mechanism that limits it, and it just spills out. And then what happens is you have an event like October 7th, or you have an event like what you're seeing on these campus tent cities. All of that's mediated and amplified online, and then it gets played out with all this passion and romper and behavior on campuses.
Okay, so let's dig into that 2 ways. So the first thing I'd like to point out, and you can comment on this if you would, is that, you mentioned that male aggression doesn't scale well and it doesn't work that well in the real world, and that's definitely the case. I mean, one of the things that my daughter was often perplexed about when she was growing up in our household with her brother is the difference in response pattern to aggression between boys and between girls. So my son and his teenage friends would not that infrequently have an altercation. Sometimes it might even come to brief blows, and that would end it, and that would often not only not stop a friendship,
think it's too
but
easy.
strengthen it. Partly because they knew where they stood with each other. Now, this didn't happen that often, but the threat of it happening was always there. Now, with the girls, by contrast, they could backbite and gossip and screech and moan and bitch and kill each other virtually online, and there was no limit to it. And it was very difficult to limit at all. It's definitely the case that female-style antisocial behavior is unbelievably difficult to regulate. Now, having said that, I'm not blaming the females for online pathological behavior, although there's certainly the female equivalent of that in places like TikTok. But what I do see happening is that the histrionic, narcissistic, and borderline, the men who have those traits can get away with that kind of female-type antisocial behavior online.
Who's doing that shit,
and
huh?
backbiting and
Stop being a
reputation
bitch.
savaging and outright Machiavellian deception with absolutely no consequences, or even worse, with a certain level of perverse reward because attention is brought to it and maybe even amplified by the social media companies. So that's not good, to say the least. Now, let's add one more thing to that people need to understand. So, the conflict between Hamas, let's say, and the people of Israel, and the rest of the bloody world for that matter, can be construed as a political or as a religious or economic battle. But you put your finger on something that's absolutely vital. So the cluster B types, the psychopaths and the narcissists and the Machiavellians, they're unbelievably good at using proclamations of victimization to justify their aggression, and also to camouflage what they're doing with a moral
Where is this
story.
nigga at?
And so, like, when I think of violent religious fundamentalists, I don't actually generally think of the religion itself as a motivation, even though it can be. I think of the psychopathic, power-striving, narcissistic Machiavellian adopting the cloak of the religious. That's what the Pharisees do in the Gospels, by the way. They're Christ's biggest enemy. They adopt the camouflage of moral virtue, religious, economic, or social, and then they pretend to be the good guys, while in fact they're ravening, what did Christ call them? Ravening graves that would devour even the ancestors that they claim to worship. And so I think that as a culture, we're radically underestimating the perverse consequences of the intermingling of the cluster B psychopathologies with the hypothetically religious, political, and economic, right? We're making them primary when in fact the
It's with all these
pathology,
bows and
the
crossbows.
cluster B pathology is probably the primary problem.
Shit get wild.
So maybe when you see people involved in sectarian violence, the first thing you should ask yourself is, well, is that sectarian violence, or is that just an excuse for the Cain-like narcissists to get the upper hand? So what do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I see the world from that lens of looking at psychopathology as opposed to the background religion itself. Clearly there's definitely historical religious conflicts that motivate some of this, but I see it much more from the perspective of how does this culture give rise to these macrosocial, what I consider contagions of these cluster B traits. And you mentioned lying and moral virtue, and I think one of the things, and I just made this point a couple of days ago with regards to what's happening here in the States and sort of the lies that the mainstream media have told about Joe Biden, is that There's lying that most corrupt politicians will do. Many people lie, there's white lies and so forth. And then there's lying but moralizing that lie. And
Need to go
moralizing
spend
that
this
lie,
money.
in my view, is much more worse and psychopathic than just some lie that you beat some kid on the street the other day and it never happened. And you see that's the strategy that they use. They lie, but they moralize it. They're the oppressed, they're the victims, so that gives them the currency to then create and engage in all sorts of atrocities or behaviors that somehow are socially acceptable. And you know, you mentioned too the sort of male instantiation of these cluster B traits, and that's
didn't get
something I
this?
saw during COVID online too. A lot of the female
weird.
scholars that I was, collaborating with at one point, or that kind of grew to know who were doing COVID work or pushing for the elimination of mask mandates or saying that lockdowns were harmful, they were getting attacked by these male narcissistic, what I would consider trolls on Twitter who had credentialed degrees, but they were constantly bullying these female nurses, doctors, and so forth in the most trollish way. And so that sort of manifestation was something that was very glaring. That would have never played out in the real world. It was only made possible by the sort of milieu of the social environment of the internet and social media. And it was something that really bothered me. And so there's this idea that you moralize that, a few people might be harmed by lockdowns, but the majority of the population won't be. And it's the majority of the population that were in fact harmed.
The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, and on delivering your product or service, the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. To reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you can reduce IT costs, cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems, and improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform and slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move. Why haven't you? By popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/JBP. That's netsuite.com/JBP. netsuite.com/JBP.
Yeah. So when you watched the Hamas atrocities, and you said that what you saw first and foremost was the pathology. Okay, so I want to delve into that a little bit, Because one of the things that's really struck me about the peculiar times that we're in is the dissociation of atrocity from guilt. So one of the things that you had to give the Nazis credit for, so to speak, is that they were guilty about their crimes and they tried to hide them. And one of the things that I see at the moment that's so unbelievably pathological that I can hardly get my head around it is that the butchery on the trans side, for example, is trumpeted as a moral virtue, right? There's no attempt to hide what's going on. In fact, it's brought forward as something that's positive. Now, that's associated in a way with what you saw with regard to the Hamas massacres, is that this is actually being reveled in. Again, we're going to talk about this independent of the hypothetical reasons for the cause. I mean, people, you just think about it, man. The sadistic types want to claim victimization because they're also predatory parasites. And if you're a victim, then other people have to kowtow to you and take care of you. And we know that half of criminal lifestyle is parasitical lifestyle, right? There's the rule breaking and the actual crime, but the other part, that's the predation. But the other part of it is living off the work of other people in an insanely unconscientious manner and coming up with a story to justify it. That the successful are just thieves themselves, for example, or that nobody really works to get what they deserve. There's no really such thing as merit. There's only power. And so since everyone's a thief, there's no reason not to get in there and get some of your own, And so you watch the tapes and with the eye of a psychopathologist. And so what do you think you saw?
Well, what I saw was the valorization of sadistic behavior, and not just sexually sadistic behavior, but the killing and mass slaughter of people. It was sort of meant to be propagated on the screen for that exact reason, to be seen as something to be glamorized. And I think in part they sort of wanted to valorize it as somehow
Oh, this nigga, what the fuck?
in
You
a
good?
way it was allowable for some sort of oppression that they had experienced at the hands of, you know, Israeli occupation or the situation in Gaza. But you can also see that, like you say, in the trans movement, online, Reddit, TikTok, there's a glamorization about this stuff that is sort of so widely discrepant from what is actually happening in the actual perpetration of, in the case of the trans.
My prayers are mine, mine alone. Well, I've had my say. I'll be more careful too.
Trans stuff, the mangling and the confusion of children, and, you know, other negative effects that this leads to, that it's almost something that they're trying to create an environment where it's seen as heroic to engage in these behaviors, when in fact it's just the opposite. And that's made possible by the social media landscape, where you can click like and you can get all the retweets and shares, or create these echo chambers. But it's a parasitic lifestyle, which is exactly what Herbie Cleckley, who really was sort of behind
Hey, I want to know about
the
this.
original construct of psychopathy. That's exactly what he identified, this parasitic lifestyle.
She has a gift for spirit tuning, so I told her everything I know. I'm indebted to a spirit tuner I met long ago. It was all I could do to honor her. I'm sorry I doubted you.
Oh, there she go.
Good to see you again. Thank you very much. I have you to thank, don't I? For persuading Master Hugh. I can happily announce that he has taught me the noble toil I'm as yet. And if there's any chance to ease the suffering of my... Well, I serve Roderica. I need to warn you about something. A little while ago, someone started lurking in the wing on the opposite side of the round table. And I can hear, from all the way over there, the howling and wailing of spirits in fear of a curse. A plethora of... I can't even imagine. Not even the grafting. You should keep your distance. I know you're... I can hear it from the howl. You should keep your... I know you should... I'd like to ask you a small... Can you take... They can't be so... The spirits, it'll be glad of you...
About time.
You again. I thought you'd Nefellilu. I'm glad to see you here. I found it in Godric's graft. You defeated him. Make good use of it. I don't intend to make it happen. I wonder if you have an old father is I'm sure talking to.
What she give me? Poison on right, 20% attack power. Raises maximum equipment load.
back already, no matter.
And they moralize that type of behavior as virtuous. It's like virtuous victimhood, and it's very toxic.
Virtuous victimhood, valorizing sadism.
You mentioned lying. There's lying, and then there's lying there's moralization of the lie. And I see the latter, moralization of the lie, as much, much worse. And we see that just recently. I'm sure you're aware of, we had a debate here in the States, Biden and Trump. It's obvious that Biden is cognitively really struggling, and we all knew this for many years, but the mainstream media constantly moralized this lie that it was somehow unfair to criticize Biden for that or to acknowledge that. That's much worse in my view than, you know, Trump just shooting off some ridiculous remark that's clearly a lie, but it's not. He's not moralizing that lie. He's not saying you're a bad person because you basically observe with your own eyes what we've all known about Biden for 4 years. And so I see the latter as much more psychopathic, parasitic, and toxic to a culture than the former.
So, okay, so I'm going to tell you a frightening story, and you tell me what you think about it. Maybe this is too pessimistic, but I'm still working that out. You know, to what degree do we have moral instincts, let's say, that are in keeping with the self-sacrificing ethos of a complex civilization? How much of that is part and parcel of our inborn conscience? You know, Cleckley, of course, defined the psychopaths as someone without a conscience or with a very underdeveloped conscience. So I read 2 books in quick succession. One of them was a book by the Dutch primatologist, who unfortunately is recently deceased, Frans de Waal. One of his books on chimpanzee behavior. Don't remember which one because I read a number of his books. But he detailed out the phenomenon of chimpanzee war, essentially. And this was first discovered, I believe, by Jane Goodall, who was pretty flipped upside down by the revelation, as she should have been, because, of course, the sociological types and the lefties and the cultural constructionists like to think that the human proclivity for warfare is a consequence of corrupt social structure, a theory which is shot to hell by the fact that chimpanzees go to war, which indicates that it's much more an inherent part of our primate nature than anyone wants to think. So what happens with the chimps is that the juveniles in particular will go on parties around the borders of their territory, let's say. They have a fairly acute sense of territory. And if they come across chimpanzees from another troop, and they outnumber them because they have a rudimentary sense of amount anyways, they can't count, but they have a sense of amount, they'll attack them, sometimes with juvenile females accompanying them. And they tear them to shreds, right? So what seems to be the case is that in the absence of a social hierarchy that limits aggression, so if a male gets too aggressive in a troop, the rest of the troop gets upset, and generally the alpha male will step in to quell it, or the rest of the troop will. So you can think about the troop's level of negative emotion as an inhibitory function, It clamps down on male aggression, which might otherwise have no limit. Okay, so why would I say no limit? Well, because when you look at the chimpanzees go to war, when they're attacking a troop member that has no social standing, which would be a member of another troop, there's no limit to what they'll do. Now, chimpanzees are capable of hunting. They hunt 40-pound colobus monkeys, and they'll eat them alive while they're screaming.
Okay,
So it isn't obvious that the distress of another primate has much inhibitory force. And so they'll use their jaws to castrate the other chimpanzees, for example, and literally tear their skin off. And they're very, very powerful. They're very, very strong. About 6 times as strong as the typical adult male. So look the hell out if you're attacked by a chimpanzee. Okay, so the hypothesis there would be our closest primate relatives have no inhibition whatsoever on their capacity for aggression once they're outside the confines of a well-constituted social hierarchy. Okay, so soon after that, I read The Rape of Nanking, and which is a book about as brutal as any book you might ever come across, and it details the magnitude of Japanese atrocity in the city of Nanking just prior to World War II. And there isn't, you would have to be one pathological person indeed to imagine, even in the wildest extremes of your most vicious fantasies, anything worse than what happened in Nanking. You could take the worst possible chimpanzee troop and equip them with a much more sadistic imagination and then set them free to do anything they could possibly imagine. And that's what happened in Nanking. And so then I started thinking, oh my God, does that actually mean that there's no limit on human aggression inside of social hierarchy, essentially? Because, you know, there were a lot of normal Japanese soldiers that were involved in this. It was certainly contagious. Now, undoubtedly, it was led by the bloody psychopathic sadistic types, and it was certainly the case that the Japanese government had instilled in their troops a sense of ethnic superiority with regard to the Chinese.
No way.
And dehumanization of the Chinese, but that in itself isn't enough to account for this stunning sadistic brutality. And so, you know, that would indicate that, well, what does it indicate? It indicates that that psychopathic and sadistic tendency might be a lot more transmissible than we think, at minimum.
Yeah, I think the abolition of hierarchies has led to worse hierarchies in almost every situation and historical circumstance we can think of. Hierarchies are an ingrained part of human behavior. And when you try to replace them with some other utopian scheme where there is no hierarchy or dominance hierarchy, what you end up with is what you just described. That's really what the tyranny of structuralism is all about. When there is no hierarchy or guiding set of principles to create a hierarchy, you just have complete structuralism. And to think about it, that's what you see in all this cluster behavior. It's completely dysregulated. There's no structure to any of them. And that's really what's at the heart of, I think, the cultural ways that we're living through, is that all of these ideologues want to abolish structure and categories, whether that's categories of health, diagnostic classifications, law in society, and you see this with some of the LGBT plus 3,000 world things. They want to abolish any type of constraint.
This guy's crazy.
And as Reef, one of the cultural commentators, Philip
don't like
Reef,
magic,
who
though.
is no longer with us, once you have a culture in which man is allowed to express anything, you have a culture in crisis. You have no constraints on the ability of anybody to live any pathology they want or do anything they want. There's nothing, no hierarchy, no containment at all to some of the underlying tyrannical behavior that can be given rise to when you have a lack of structure or containment. So we have a culture in crisis right now because they're trying to abolish all structure, all containment, all hierarchy, and that's just a recipe for cultural disintegration.
All right, so on that note, let's turn to the more particularly personal. So I sat on the university hiring committees at Harvard and at the University of Toronto, and I've evaluated a lot of CVs, and your CV is good. It might be very good. page index of 34, which means that you have 34 papers with more than 34 citations. And so that's at minimum respectable, and a citation count of about 5,000 for those of you listening. Scientific productivity and merit is quantified, not least by observing how many other scientists cite someone's work, that is, refer to it in their own writing and research. Now, it's not a perfect measure because you can be cited for being hyper-popular in a sense, or you can be cited for publishing an erroneous paper that people are required to refer to. But by and large, citation count is actually a good predictor of future productivity. It's about the best predictor we have, actually, that and pure number of papers. And so number of well-cited papers is also a good indicator. So on purely objective grounds, you know, you're a contender, let's say. You can obviously speak and you can obviously think and you're very interested in research. And so we might ask ourselves, why aren't you employed in the academy? And so do you want to tell that story? You were at the University of Toronto in the psychiatry department. Tell everyone what happened and how things ended up for you, and why, as far as you're concerned.
I think there's a number of different things that I thought. Obviously, I have no specific reasons for why I'm not in the academy. I have a number of different takes on why that may be, but a couple of different things. A lot of my early work was in attachment, and that's a very nuanced field of research that is, you know, has its own people in the academy that do that kind of work and so forth and so on. Another reason is that I'm very strident in what I believe, what I say, what I feel. And if you're a white male, and especially in psychology, and you're strident, and you tend to be a little bit more outspoken, that's seen as being too disagreeable. Once you get on faculty interviews, of which I've been on many, it becomes a personality contest. And I think in retrospect, I've been told things like I don't smile enough on faculty interviews or other outlandish things that have nothing to do with my merit. I'm sure that there's been faculty interviews or job market searches where I've given talks that haven't been great as other talks. So you never know the real reason why you don't end up in the academy, or you end up not staying in it. As far as sort of where I'm at now, when I was at the University of Toronto and working, you know, at the medical hospital that I was there, it was during that period of time where things were getting very woke, especially around the gender stuff. I was working with people who, you know, they claim to be scientists who are rigorous, and you have they, them in their bios. And that to me was just outlandish. I mean, how can you be at a